Hi there. So as we begin our unit on the past tense, I want to talk about how to pronounce regular verbs in the past tense. Part 1 of this presentation is just consonants and vowels. So I'm going to use these terms to explain the pronunciation, so you should probably understand what they mean. The English alphabet has 26 letters. 5 of them are vowels. All of the other letters are consonants. Here are the vowels: A, E, I, O, and U. So these 5 letters are in a group called the vowels, and vowel sounds have a vibration in the vocal cords of the throat. And they also have a free flow of air through the mouth. So if I say the sound of A, I can feel the vibrations happening in my throat. And you can also feel how the air is going fast, the air is moving easily. The same thing with E, I. So all of these vowel sounds always have vibration, always have the air flowing freely. Now the consonants are all the other letters in the alphabet, and these letters are different. They make a category because these sounds sometimes have vibrations in the throat and sometimes not. But the most important thing is that all of these sounds kind of close the air's pathway in the mouth so that it's difficult for the air to move. So if I make a sound like B, B, you can see how when I put my lips together, I'm stopping the air. And all of these sounds kind of slow down the air in some way. So we have vowels and we have consonants. Now, now let's go to pronouncing the past tense ed. So the past tense, when it's regular, is made by adding the letters ed to the end of a verb. Here's just a few examples. I can take the base form of walk, and when I make the past tense, it turns into walked. When I have the base form listen, to make the past tense, it becomes listened. Or want becomes wanted in the past tense. So that part is easy to spell it. You just put the letters E and D. Now, the ed letters that we use for the past tense have 3 different pronunciations, and I'm gonna just pronounce some words for you, and I want you to listen to see if you can understand what is the same between the words in these groups. Starting with group 1, walked, stopped, jumped, looked, laughed. So all of those words are kind of similar. And group 2, listened, planned, realized, followed, borrowed. So group 2, a little bit different than group 1. And then group 3, wanted, started, needed, decided, and polluted. So, you probably felt that group 1 and group 2 were very similar, and some people can't even hear the difference between these 2 groups. And if you can't, that's okay. If you understand that those are basically the same, we're okay. But the important thing is to really be able to hear that group 3 has a different sound in that ed. If that's difficult, stop the video here, go back and listen again. Basically what you're hearing here is that in group 1, the letters ed, these letters at the end of the word, they sound like t, t, t. So that's why I say walked, stopped, jumped, looked. I hear t, t, t for this group. Now, this other group's just a little bit different. I hear the sound of d, d. It's also a quiet sound, but it sounds more like a D than a T. So you hear listened, planned, realized. It doesn't have that same sort of airy sound. This is t, 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 and this is d, d, d. Now, when we get to the last group, the ed sounds like ed. So that's why this sounds like wanted or started. I can really hear that complete ed. In the group 1 and group 2, I don't hear any sound coming from the E. But when I come to the third group, I hear ed, ed, ed. Another way to think of this is that group 1 is very quiet, group 2 is quiet, and group 3 is loud, like you add a whole syllable to the word. Now, why do these words have different pronunciations? The spelling is the same. Why is the pronunciation different? And this has to do with the way that the sounds are formed. So, for example, let's look at group 1, and you have to pay attention to the last letter or the last sound in the verb. Walk, stop, jump, etc. So in these words, the last sound of the word has no vibration in the throat. If I say k, p, k, f, those are quiet sounds. And so the ed that comes after them kind of matches them by also being quiet. So I have a quiet K, then I have a quiet T sound. Quiet goes with quiet. And then something similar happens in group 2. I look at the last letter of the word, and in these words, the last sound of the word has vibration. So if I say for the N, I can feel my throat having a sound, and Z for the Z. O, this OW sounds like the vowel of O, and the same thing with this OW. So I have a big vibration in the last sound of the word, and so what happens is that because my throat is vibrating, or I'm making a loud sound, then also the ED gets a louder sound. That's why we have listened, planned, realized. So that sort of happens naturally. If this sound is quiet, then the ED is quiet. If this sound is louder, then the ED is louder. Now, these two are both still pretty quiet, and they can be a little bit hard to hear. And if it sounds like they're both the same, that's okay. The important thing is when we come to this last group, the last sound of the word is a T or a D. And these are kind of special. They really need to sound different. So when I look at the last letter here and I see a T or a D, then I can't put the T sound next to the D sound. And so I say the sound of the E, I say the sound of a vowel in order to add that extra D for the past tense at the end. And that's why this sounds like wanted, started, needed, decided, polluted. So I hope that makes it really clear. This T or D at the end of the word is kind of like an exception where you need to make it extra loud affix. So the important thing here is what sound is happening at the end of the word. Just as a review, if the last sound of the word is a quiet sound, right here in this position, if we have C, K, F, P, S, X, or ch, that's the situation when we get this t, t, t sound. And if the last sound of the word is a loud sound, like a vowel sound or B, G, J, V, Z, L, R, M, and N. Those are the sounds that make vibrations. Then that's when we get this D, D, D at the end of the verb. Finally, if the last sound of the word is T or D, that's when you need this extra syllable. These are similar sounds or quiet sounds for group 1 and group 2, and then add a syllable for group 3. Let's do a little bit of practice. So for these words, do you hear like a blended or quiet sound for the ED, or do you hear an extra syllable? Listen carefully. Walk, walked. Cook, cooked. Look, looked. Would you say this is quiet, or is this an extra syllable? I said these ED sounds are blended or quiet. So we have walk, walked, cook, cooked, look, looked. The D sound kind of blends into the rest of the word. For practice number 2, do you hear a blended quiet sound, or do you hear an extra syllable? I'm gonna say them once and then you can check. Create, created. Graduate, graduated. Limit, limited. Is it blended or quiet, or an extra syllable? Well, I said these ED sounds give the word an extra syllable. It looks like this. This word has 2 syllables. This word has 3 syllables. Here we have 3 with the ED, it makes 4. Here we have 2 with the ED, it becomes 3. It sounds like create, created. Graduate, graduated. Limit, limited. So far, so good. Practice number 3. Do you hear a blended or quiet sound for the ED, or do you hear an extra syllable? The words are press, pressed. Ask, asked. Fix, fixed. Well, I said for these, the ED sounds are blended or quiet. They look like this. So this has the same number of syllables, but you just have a quiet sound on the end. Press, pressed. Ask, asked. Fix, fixed. This is our last practice. Do you hear a blended quiet sound for the ED, or do you hear an extra syllable? The words are clean, cleaned. Plan, planned. Live, lived. Is that quiet or is it loud? Well, I hope you said that these ED sounds are blended or quiet. Sounds like this. Clean, cleaned, plan, planned, and live, lived. That's all for this presentation. I hope that helps. After this, I'd like you to take a quiz to see if you can really hear the differences in those sounds. Good luck.